When I was 14 or 15 years old, I decided that I wanted to be an architect. Didn't know any architects, really didn't know a lot about them, but I decided that's what I wanted to do. And in grade 10, I figured the one way to start that would be to take a course in drafting. And so I did that. There was something about being able to dream of something and then draw it and then build it. Sculptors often talk about their art, the craft of sculpting, as having two particular challenges. First, it is seeing in the material, whether it's stone or metal or wood, what work of art is waiting to be discovered, waiting to be created. And the second challenge is overcoming the puzzles that particular material presents as it is being transformed into the work of art that it is meant to be. So seeing David in a slab of marble is the first step. And the second step is figuring out how to shape and mold the marble so that David emerges. And I think preaching is like that. In preaching, we're called to see or discover the word of the Lord or the good news that is in the passage. What's the work of art? What's the good news that is in Paul's letter to the Philippians? In particular on this Thanksgiving Sunday. And especially today, as we are bombarded with the negativism of our culture, with news of destruction and violence, and with a presidential election cycle that is devolving lower and lower, especially when it's dealing with ages of sex and race. So Paul, in the midst of this, implores the church in Philippi to rejoice always, no matter what. So let's see if we can get the piece of art, the good news, out of that passage. So the first puzzle is grammatical. Where do we put the phrase in that passage, "The Lord is near"? It can be used and has been used many times as a motivation device or a behavior modification tool. The Lord's near, so you better smarten up. Rejoice, the Lord is with you always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. So it becomes a question of motivation. We know he's here, so we better behave. But Paul isn't saying that, I don't think. Because he has a fierce joy, a fierce rejoicing no matter what. And it comes from following the one who is near, who is with us no matter what. So it's likely it goes at the beginning. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. In other words, the Lord is near. Lighten up. Rejoice. Live out of God's love, out of God's grace. Live your thankful response. Well, the second puzzle. If we take a little closer look at the context, we can see it. And the second challenge, or the puzzle, is when Paul makes that confession that he is content in all circumstances. And if you know anything about Paul at this particular time, he is not at his home office someplace on the shore of the Mediterranean. He is in prison. Trust God in all circumstances. But there's a piece in it at the end that I had never noticed before. He says, "You have learned to be content." So if you have learned it, Paul had to learn it. He didn't always feel that way. He needed to learn to be content in all circumstances. And you need to practice it, is what he's saying. I know most of you have felt content, at peace, no matter what the circumstances, at some point of time in your life. But I also know that we know of people who, no matter what happens and what they have, they are not content. What's the difference? I mean, think of the people that live this passage, who rejoice no matter what. We know someone who is facing a major or terminal illness that just seems to have that trust. Or someone who has lost a loved one, and while they're yet grieving, they find those moments in life in which the memories are celebrated. Or someone who has lost a job but hasn't lost hope. We know those people and those moments. Those moments can be hard to remember because sometimes they are few, but mostly because we live in a culture that seems to always and relentlessly tell us that we do not have enough, we are not enough, and we will never be enough. We're constantly bombarded with ads that stir up that sense, that devouring sense of lack. And out of that discontent, we are urged to buy their product. But it's time to be countercultural, to find a new way of doing it. Master Foods, a big grocery chain in Australia, engaged in a very interesting social experiment. They asked families, if you could have anybody, living or dead, over for dinner, who would it be? Anyone familiar with the campaign? Good. It's the first time you've seen it.
It starts with a tour around the country to ask 40 real Aussie families one simple question.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose?
Marilyn Monroe.
Kim Kardashian.
No.
Maybe Nelson Mandela at the dinner table.
I'd like to have dinner with Justin Bieber.
What? He's not coming to my house.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would you choose?
My family. Does it have to be a celebrity? Could it be family? Mom and Dad.
They see us above everything. I'm gonna get...
What are we having for dinner?
That one simple question really hit home. Over 128 million people have watched the film, and it's been shared over 1.4 million times, making it Australia's fourth most shared ad of all time. Print and out of home prompted Aussies to make dinner time matter, featuring real families who were, to inspire those who weren't. And my favourite part of the story, Master Foods closed down their factory that never normally sleeps, so their staff could head home to make dinner time matter with loved ones. It didn't take long before Masterfood's inspiring message spread around the world, reaching over 160 million people. That's over 6 times the population of Australia. Inspired by the campaign, people responded, becoming passionate advocates by sharing, posting, and making dinner time matter again.
Very interesting ad. Think of a time that you have felt content when you were able to rejoice in difficult circumstances. I mean, I've sat with people recently that needed to move into another transition into more assisted living. A very difficult challenge. And yet in the midst of that, they knew that they weren't alone. That somebody was there to care for them. And there was this contentment that was awe-inspiring. And I don't think this type of rejoicing should surprise us, because the people around us, the people in this community, remind us of God's grace. Remind us that it is necessary to give thanks. And it's always in the context, or at least in our story, in the context of community. Do you remember that point? Paul is in prison and being content, but he has to learn this. He is alone. And what does the church in Philippi do? They send him people, they send him companions to be with him so that he will not be alone in this ordeal. The support of community is absolutely essential. And I hope you remembered your promises that you made to these 4 girls and 1 boy today. Martin Luther wrote a letter to George Spalatin around 1543. His daughter Magdalene died in 1542. And he wrote to his good friend, said, "George, I know I should rejoice because Magda no longer suffers. But right now, I can't. I can't. But I implore you to give thanks and rejoice in my stead until such a time as I can do it." Isn't that the work of art, the good news that's in this passage? To be able to trust, to be able to rejoice in community no matter what we face. Rejoice in the Lord always. I mean, take a close look at what we've done. Ellen, Lindsay, Alice, Luke, and Lucy. And did you notice the theme that was unpacking as we did the etymology of their names? And Mary Jo is the person who came up with that wonderful idea. Light-giving, light-bearer, light, princess, courageous. And may they, with the support of this community, of their community of faith, grow into those wonderful, powerful names within a community of faith and grace. Amen.